Righty, hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar from 3D Printing Industry, the authority on additive manufacturing. I'm Paul Hanaphy, a technology journalist at 3D Printing Industry, and I'll be your host for today's event, in which we'll try to establish the current state of play in the emerging 3D printing construction sector. To help me do that, I have a brilliant panel of speakers lined up for you today, but before I introduce them, we just have to do a bit of housekeeping. For those of you who aren't familiar with the AirMeet platform, the chat function is available on the right-hand side of your screen. Here you can chat to other attendees. You can say hi to colleagues and have your say on some of the discussions that arise from today's webinar. To the right of that, you'll also find a Q&A box where you can ask questions of our panel and also vote up the questions that you'd like us to answer. Rest assured, we will be taking questions throughout the event. So if there is something that you want to ask our panel, please do so through here, and we'll do our best to try and get through as many as we possibly can. So the first hour of today's event will be a panel discussion between our speakers, followed by a networking session. So when the first hour is up, you'll be directed back to the networking area where you can click around the tables and join in different discussions on what we've been spoken about or whatever we end up speaking about today. So with all that out in the open, I'd like to bring our panel on stage. Lovely. How are we, everyone?
Hello.
Hello, all. Very well, thank you.
So today, as you can see, we have William Varah, Programme Director of Modern Methods of Construction at the UK's Infrastructure and Projects Authority, Ibon Iribar, an Investment and Open Innovation Advisor at CEMEX Ventures, and Cheniuntai, CEO of Apis Core. So thank you for all joining me today. Before we get stuck in, how about we start with some introductions? Why don't we start with you, Anna, since you're the last one introduced?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. That's a huge pleasure to have this conversation with the incredible people. So my name is Anna Cheniuntai. I'm a CEO and founder of Apis Core. So we are the robotics technology company that develop proprietary technology to 3D print full-scale houses with the concrete-like materials. So our technology is the robots, software, material science, also all of the software around the architecture and how to design houses, how to connect the 3D printing and digital world, like how to design and actually get it printed somewhere in Missouri, for example, or in Florida in the real ground. And so we have been doing this technology for 5 years so far. And while we were developing, learning on our mistakes and trying to figure out how actually it should work and what should not work, what we should do and what we shouldn't do. So we 3D printed the largest building on earth that located in Dubai. It's a 2-story, beautiful administrative building. And so we also the finalist of NASA competition. The NASA competition is, of course, like the long-term plan, how some days the robots and autonomous technologies can be deployed on Moon and Mars to build shelters for first to arrive. And also last year was pretty busy for us. We 3D printed 2 buildings, one in Boca Chica, Texas, another one in Missouri. It was part of our extensive product development and also the commercial projects as well. And so now we relocated and headquartered in Melbourne, Florida. It's a Space Coast, beautiful location. And Florida is one of the largest state in the United States with the concrete low-rise construction. So it's also strategically the location that we chosen to be here. And so now we are in a preparation to go to market. And while we're doing this, we also try to educate people. We have the Apis Core University and we share our experience, all of the pain that we learned so far. We're happy to share it. And so we basically working on very hard to bring the technology to the construction world and start printing more and more houses to help construction companies increase the productivity. And eventually, as we all hear today, is to rethink construction and change the way how we build houses, because it's obviously is not working and we cannot continue doing this.
Wow, so there's a lot going on at Apis Core then, exciting stuff. So how about you, Ibon? Tell us a bit about what you do at CEMEX Ventures.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for the invitation to this session. I'm also happy to be here with Anna and William. So my name is Ibon, and I am representing CEMEX Ventures, which is the investment arm and open innovation platform of CEMEX, a global building materials company with a presence in around 50 countries in the world. And 5 years ago, we decided to launch what is today CEMEX Ventures, aiming to identify new business models of disruptive solutions that bring additional revenue sources to the company. And in this journey, we have identified different pain points and challenges along the whole construction value chain. And within this batch of opportunities, we have identified this 3D printing space as one of the most promising fields in order to be deep dived. And that is what we have been doing in the last five years. We see this technology and this space very, very challenging and promising in the same time. And that's why we have tried to identify and speak with almost every player, both in the entrepreneurial side, but also in the corporate side. So we have done different, we have developed different activities. We are from the investment perspective, but also in the, for example, as a material company, developed a mix, our first 3D printed concrete mix. And that's why we have been supporting, for example, companies and projects in this space. I'm happy, and today happy to share more insights and comments together with Anne and William as well.
Sounds great. I look forward to hearing them. And how about yourself, William? So you come into the debate from a slightly different angle, don't you? Tell us a bit about what you do.
That's right. Yeah. So my name is Will Varah, or well, William if I'm in trouble, or Will if I'm not in trouble. So Will Varah, and I'm a program director for modern methods of construction at the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, as Paul has already said. And for those who don't know, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority in the UK is the government's centre of expertise for infrastructure and major projects, and it reports into sort of two places, so the Cabinet Office and Treasury. And in terms of my focus, so my role, I suppose, my focus is on improving the societal outcomes that we can achieve from the interventions that we make and the investments that we make in our infrastructure. And one of the ways that I've been doing that over the last few years or so has been creating policy that does that. One in particular, which I'll call out, which is called Transforming Infrastructure Performance Roadmap to 2030, catchily titled. And that will do in terms of an introduction from me. So a sort of policy angle.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Will. We'll stick to Will. We'll stay on friendly terms to kick things off. Right. So I thought we'd start with a discussion of some of the benefits. So there's a lot of hype around construction 3D printing at the moment, isn't there? It's not just within 3D printing, but in the mainstream press. Ibon, you mentioned you've talked to people from all over the industry about some of the potential that 3D printing has to offer in construction. What sort of benefits have you uncovered there?
Yeah, we have seen that there are lots of benefits and good sides in this 3D printing thing. As all of us may know, but the speed of the technology, the speed of printing and building the prototype house, building or whatever it is built. Also, we have the sustainability part, since we are able to introduce, for example, some materials that today are treated as waste, and it can be converted into new additives or new ingredients for the mixes as well. For example, there is also another good side, which is the how we can integrate in a very short time all the installation of the machine, the mix of the ingredients, the duration of the printing itself, and the time needed for the finishings and the final installations. So we are seeing a lot of benefits in this space. And another good point that we have seen is that this 3D printing ecosystem is progressing quite well in the last 5 to 6 years. For example, in 2015-16, the hardware part was in the last phases of the development, building the commercial sites. And now we are seeing that this the hardware part is more than ready to be launched to the market. Indeed, there are a lot of companies like Apiscore and other in the ecosystem that are selling and developing projects with their machines. Now we are seeing that the challenge or the space to be developed or deep dive is more the material side or the mixer side, in order to find the most suitable or the most efficient formula for the mixes and a more standardized batch of ingredients for the mixes. So I would highlight that the sustainability and the speed of the technology.
Yeah, it's definitely very much touted benefits of the technology, isn't it? Thank you for that, Ibon. How about you, Anna? Is that how you see it on the ground? Do you see those benefits? Do you see slightly different ones, perhaps?
So, like any new technology, the only goal of any new technology is how to improve something that we did in the past, how to do something better. So with this technology, absolutely, the entire thing is how we can do something better. With the 3D printing technology, the main goal, like any other automation, is how to increase productivity, how to increase quality, and also have the consistent quality. So it's something that never been introduced in the traditional construction. We all know why. So we have the very huge shortage of skilled labor. And it's not something like we need new technologies to replace labor. We just need more labor. And today labor, it's not enough to build as many houses as we need. So I would say the main benefit of the technology is how we really can fill this gap for new homes, for affordable houses, and for accessible houses. Because affordable housing is not the only problem. You even don't have the opportunity to have a house, even if you have a lot of money today. You need to wait. It's because the speed of the construction. So, but it's more like the productivity, building faster, cheaper, with better quality. But also the other benefits comes as I see it more like the large landscape of the entire industry, that we can create new type of jobs, for example, right? So the young generation today, they're not really attracted to work in the construction field, mixing the concrete. It's a hard, dirty, physical work. But today you can be the printer operator, right? And it's much more attractive for the new people, right? And we need more people working in the construction. So, but we need to think about construction as the construction technology, not as a construction that it was in the past. So I would say with this new technology, it's not just to have better houses, it's how we can really reshape and expand the industry and providing opportunities for the young people, for the retired people to work, for example, because of the robots, right, that you can operate, and you need to have a pickup truck, and you can drop the printer on the construction site and start building the house, and the opportunities for women in construction. So, and also beside that, the new areas for the building performance and for construction technologies, the material science, how we can do the value engineering, for example. So build houses with the better quality, because with the 3D printing technology, we can rethink and redesign how we do installation, how we do mechanical, electrical, plumbing, how we can do houses better. So I would say that it's really the huge impact on overall industry, and a lot of other small industries that connected to this, they're going to be impacted in positive way, of course.
Wow, so a whole heap of positives there. So everything from sustainability to jobs and house quality. So I guess they're much touted, as I said before. These are known within the industry, maybe less known outside of it. How do they play into how planning is done in terms of planning new infrastructure in the UK, Will?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I suppose, well, thank you, Ibon and Anna. Those were sort of fantastic perspectives. And I can agree with that. Certainly in the policy that I talked about, transforming infrastructure performance, we've characterized benefits by talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because those are the things, you know, it's quite easy to get carried away with sort of cost or speed, and actually, you know, we need to tie it back to the things that make a difference for people, which is, you know, what, like clean water or clean air, or like the quality of the employment. So absolutely, those are the things in. But I suppose more specifically to your question, Paul, about the way that we think about the interventions that we make and the way that we plan for those. And I suppose the starting point for that, if we're, from my perspective, if we're thinking about improving the way that we make those interventions, is that it's going to become, or needs to become, certainly, and looks like it is becoming, a more digitally enabled landscape. And so that isn't just in relation to 3D printing. That is, you know, for a whole range of technologies. The way that we implement those technologies in construction means that we will need to become more digitally enabled. So actually, even if it isn't for this precise role of the 3D printing operator, actually, you know, if they're coming into, like, in UK terms, that might be like what looks like a Victorian construction site, but, you know, something wouldn't look out of place 100 years ago. It's going to be very difficult to apply 3D printing. So yeah, absolutely, we're going to need to become more digitally enabled. And in answer more specifically to your question, that plays right the way through the system of thinking about the interventions that we make. So we need to understand the need in terms of the built environment, the natural environment, the services on which we depend. We need to understand that as an interlinked system of systems where one thing connects to another thing. So we don't think like, I want to build X faster in isolation, but we think about that in relation to, you know, the whole of the built environment. So, you know, our major infrastructure interventions are considered in their contexts, not just in isolation. So that's the sort of broader landscape. And that means that sort of digitally enabled point means that we need to use things like connected digital twins to understand the system. And that helps then as we're sort of coming to a rounded view on what we intervene in and how we make that intervention. That then plays into what are the outcomes that we're after, which might be, you know, so to pick up on Anna's point, that might be, you know, we want to use our, in the UK, we want to use our whatever 650 billion forecast investment over the course of the next decade. We want to use that to create different sorts of employment, exactly Anna's point. So yeah, that's a starting perspective. Understand the system and choose your interventions accordingly.
Interesting. I mean, I think that plays nicely, Will, into our first question we have there from R. Keith Julian. Thank you for the comment. So Keith Julian asks, which components of residential or commercial construction cannot be 3D printed? And approximately what cost or percentage of construction do these non-3D printed components represent? So I think he raises an interesting point about where specifically the technology can be applied. And without touching too much on limits, I think that's maybe the next step in our discussion. Anna, where do you think the technology can be applied? Maybe not necessarily just in 3D printing houses, but in other areas of the construction sector.
So I would say the small architect forms, and it's not necessarily to use our equipment for this. The industrial robots, for example, they're perfect for this. You can just install it in the in-house and 3D print nice, beautiful architecture with the parametric designs. I just see it every day online and all the time, like so fascinated with this. So it's not structural, it's more like an architecture, small forms that can be part of the landscape. and actually increase the quality of the architecture and how the houses look like, right? Because it's also important. The houses are the place where we live, where we spend like most of our time every day. So that's very important how they look like, right? When you look at your window. And so also it can be the elements of the structural elements of the building. But again, it's not something that's very well studied today or like a very well applied and used today in every construction project. I just see that some of the other companies, they very active in this and have done a very good progress. So 3D printing technology is just the way how we can fabricate objects faster, cheaper, and it's basically additive manufacturing process, which is opposite to a subtractive manufacturing process. We all know subtractive manufacturing process is when you have the body and then you cut out all of the material like a mill, using the CNC milling, for example, and you get the shape you need. And then you also have the bunch of waste material that you cut off to get the shape of this object. With the additive manufacturing, why it was so huge revolution, even like a plastic or small fabrication, additive manufacturing, because you can create the shape of an object or the actual object without cutting off all of this material. You just add the material and you add as much material as you need to get the form of the object. So basically applying this fundamental approach to even like a larger concrete structural parts of the building or the entire building, for example, this is the fundamental approach. And then if you understand this, then you can kind of like start thinking about, okay, what the benefits of this approach, and then you can figure out where exactly it can be used. So for the electrical, plumbing, and woodwork, for example. So, you know, with every new innovation, you also need to think like what would be the actual pragmatic and economically wise application of this, right? Because we can 3D print a lot of stuff, but the question is it going to be economically applicable? Is it going to be cheap? Will not this make harder what we already doing successfully, right? So I mean, like with the innovations, we can be very creative and try like, oh, let's do this, let's do this, let's do that. But we have to be very practical with this. And once we understand the fundamental approach of the additive manufacturing, then we can like think of, okay, here it makes sense. Here it doesn't make sense. And so just sharing more part of vision that we have, that 3D printing, construction 3D printing technology, it's the part of the entire construction process, right? Today we 3D print the wall structures, but it does not mean that it's just the walls, it's not interesting. No, basically with the 3D printed walls, you can change and improve all of the other linked process, like how you install the wood, the roof, for example, how you install mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Because 3D printed walls, they have more flexibility in the structure of the walls, in the size of the walls, because with the 3D printing technology, you can build 8-inch wall or you can build 12-inch wall. And for the machine, there is no difference, right? And the cost-wise, it's also not different. So you have this great flexibility where you can actually introduce the value engineering with the insulation, with many other stuff. So just to sum up, I would say that it's the non-structural, architectural, small forms, and also structural components of the building, and of course the actual building itself, the 3D printed walls.
Great, very thorough, Anna. Thank you. You raised some interesting points there about some of the kind of the interesting architectural stuff that we actually report a lot on at 3D printing industry, but also there's potentially more money or more value to be made in the less sexy applications of the technology, if you'll excuse the phrasing, that it's, you know, some of the stuff under the hood, so to speak, you know, some of the stuff that doesn't get publicized might have the best value proposition. So take Big Rep, for example, introduced a 3D printing formwork material last year, which they say is reusable as opposed to traditional formwork, which you throw away. So therefore there's money to be saved there. Will, coming back to you, how feasible do you think these sort of smaller scale applications are in the wider construction industry?
Yeah, so I think I think there are two different ways of thinking about that question. There is how feasible they are on site, so on the construction site. And then I think there's also how feasible are they away from the construction site, so on site and off site. And I think there's an important differentiation to make between those. And some of that comes down, so you can sort of drag some of that back to what are the outcomes that we're after, but also to some of the sort of complexities and nuances of a construction site. And there's always going to be a difference between what you can do if you're adopting a sort of genuinely manufacturing approach, by which I don't just mean like an off-site modular approach to building a building, but you've really thought about manufacturing the whole thing and the process and how it's going to be assembled. Then I think you can start seeing how actually all of the people who are providing the kit that goes into that building, so that the M&E cassettes and all the rest of it, actually why wouldn't those manufacturers be looking at the value proposition for 3D printing different parts of that kit? So I think when you start looking at what you would choose to 3D print on site, that's only a small proportion of the overall, and I think there'll be a huge role for 3D printing the stuff that is off-site and then taken to site and assembled there. That's a starting point, I think.
Interesting. We do get different approaches to construction 3D printing already. We've seen some companies developing prefab buildings and shipping them there, and then you've got on-site 3D printing companies as well. So it's an interesting point you raised, Will. So Ibon, you've mentioned to me when I've discussed it with you before that you're discussing 3D printing with all sorts of 3D printing startups. What have you seen from your experience? Is there a focus on on-site printing, off-site printing? Where's the opportunities?
So far, we have seen both sides, both options. If we are when we are reading or looking at something related to 3D printing, what comes to our mind is a machine printing in on-site in different conditions, ground conditions, and building, for example, four walls and a roof and very simple stuff. But there are plenty of options that this technology is allowing us to develop. Another less known option, but from our experience, what we are seeing is that something that could have potential in the short, medium, and long term is printing not the whole structure or the whole house or building on site, but printing some parts of the final product in a controlled environment off site. For example, in a manufacturing plant, you can print the walls or another parts of the final product, and delivery or sending them and delivering them in the final site, depending on the cost and the transportation and logistical cost. So from our experience, we have seen so far everything, but the truth is that it's more common to see on-site machines printing on-site because of right now we are at that development level that we need to prove. We are at that demo level of the technology and the final product. So we are starting to transform from that demo level to more commercial or fully commercial business model. So we are something in between. So what we need as a materials company, but also the startups and the whole ecosystem, what is needed is to prove the true potential of the technology, that this is something that it's not for low income or ugly structures, that is something for every public, that we could have different targets of clients, not only affordable housing clients or low income targets, but also high-end buildings. And that's why we need to first prove that this technology is something valuable for every target, and moving that technology or business models from the demo level to the more industrialized level, let's say.
Interesting. So you mentioned the demo level there. I think that ties perfectly into one of our questions from Jeff Wilson there. What is the greatest challenge, do you think, to scaling 3D printing tech in the construction industry? Because you mentioned we're at a demo level. How do we get to that commercial level? What do you think, Ibon?
Okay, may I go? Okay. As I was saying before, one of the most the strongest challenges that we are seeing is that the hardware part is ready. The technology, there are different technologies that are ready and valuable. But what I would highlight is the education of first of all for example, construction companies need to be trained in order to start using those machines, developing those projects that they are thinking to develop in a traditional way, thinking in, I'm going to develop them using these new technologies because of the benefits that we have commented before. On one hand, that education of these final clients, but also the education of the final users. I mean, for let's say normal people that are going to live in those houses, because from my understanding and the feedback that I get from our network, when we say or when we show a 3D printed house, it seems that it's something it's more like a demo than what we are saying before, or it's something that it's not very attractive to live in. So we need to make people or the market understand that this is something that is going to fulfill the building codes. It's something that is going to fulfill your the roofing, the plumbing, the electrical systems as efficient as a building or house that has been built in a traditional way or method. And the challenge, I would say, that education and also support of the government, let's say support or more pressure on developing more detailed legislations in order to introduce this new construction method as a standard in the industry.
Okay, so there might be an education and a training issue, perhaps. Is that something you've come across, Anna? Because obviously, I suppose what your company does is try to educate the market and also train up the people that are building these houses. What are the issues that you've come across in that area?
So I absolutely agree with the education and training. But before you start educating and training about something, you need to have something, right, that already learned and developed, not something like a fancy idea of 3D printed houses or something like this. Construction is not something that's just done by excitement or like let's see, we have this new technology, come and live in the house. No, you need to have a very solid data study and solid information behind what you do, and then you can educate and train people to actually learn more about this. So for example, we all know that the 3D printing technology, you can build actual 3D print any type of the infill, right? Because this is the flexibility of the technology. That's cool. That's a lot of freedom in design and what you actually can build, but it's not very good for the building code compliance and the regulations, for example. Building codes, it's about how to build something consistently and kind of have the standards, right? Because this is very responsible area. People are going to be living in the houses. We cannot build just something that don't have the supportive information behind this, on the material test results, for example, of the structural integrity, how you achieve structural integrity, how your machine works, how you design the G code, something like this. So today we have Episcore University, and we educate and train, but it's based on what we developed and studied so far. For example, we 3D print the walls that's structurally the same as concrete masonry unit block wall, basically concrete block wall. And it's something that we actually spend a lot of time to come up with this idea, how we actually can 3D print something that can be consistent structural-wise from one side to another side. So education has to be supported by really a strong study and understanding how this technology can be introduced in the market, not just because it's hype or because it's so fancy and neat technology. So otherwise it doesn't make sense to provide the education. It's like a zero education, basically. So this is why this is the one of the challenge for the technology, is to really have data and have a very scientific approach behind this technology and try to find a way how we really can integrate this technology to comply with the building codes, make sure that the material is correct, that it's correctly delivered. There is no mistakes between the material is produced and delivered and extruded. And only then we can start educating. But in general, I agree that we also need to educate the market. So people who go into live in the house going to be open to this. And actually, in Florida, for example, there is a Florida Realtor survey done in last year, I think. 66% of responders, they said that they will love to live in the 3D printed house. Some of the other people, like more than 30%, they love the idea of 3D printed houses because it's stronger, it's hurricane resistant, it's like a greater architecture. So here in the United States, we see pretty positive and very fast progress in how people see the 3D printed houses. And so, and another challenge, I would say, just speaking from me being a company, a startup, is how we can have more printers out there to 3D print houses. So this is the more like a startup problem, especially with the startup that doing hard technology. It's manufacturing, it's scaling the manufacturing. So this is the completely different story. So even if we figure out how to 3D print houses, we know that they're safe and sound. We still need to produce a lot of 3D printers, right, to meet the demand and print more houses. So it's pretty complex thing. But I would say that what we do is to change the world in a really big way. And we know that big changes, they cannot be done overnight, right? The Rome was not printed in a day, but with the technology, it could be, right? So we just need to be more patient and really work hard to bring more science behind this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that, Anna. So in kind of a menagerie of reasons why the technology is not quite there yet, you mentioned regulation. I think we're coming into your territory, Will, with this sort of talk about planning and what's preventing it being implemented in that area. There's also a question from Lee Smith that's caught my eye on the Q&A that says, what is the main concern from insurers and planning authorities regarding 3D printed structures in the UK? And why are the UK government authorities not expressing as much interest in the tech as other countries are? So that sounds like one you could lend your insight to. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. It's in a sense, there are sort of a few different ways of thinking about those questions. There's sort of a collection of questions there, and they're actually quite, they're linked to each other. So scale plays into, how do we scale plays into warranties and insurance and building regulations and so on. I mean, I think it's useful to differentiate between kind of social and economic infrastructure. So, hospitals and schools and roads and railways and the stuff that government has a more direct role in procuring. And then the housing market, which certainly in the UK at least isn't by and large, isn't really done like that. And they're actually two very different markets there. So if this is kind of hopelessly oversimplifying and generalizing, but for the housing market, it is quite a sort of disaggregated, fragmented industry. So lots and lots and lots of smaller players. I'm not saying that it's entirely unlike that for the sort of social and economic infrastructure delivery, but a little bit less like that. So I think in the social and economic infra space, there's definitely a cultural side to this question. In other words, it isn't just about, will we get insurance and how's it going to go on the planning front, but actually it's just, there is a sort of a great big weight of cultural heritage that comes with the way that we have always done construction and learned behaviors. So the way that we've always procured and the kinds of contracts that we've always used and the way that we incentivize or don't incentivize performance. So I think that is a really significant factor, actually. And some of that is addressed through education, and some of that is addressed through sort of digital enablement, and some of it is addressed through, as Anna was saying, coming up with the really good evidence and the case studies that persuade people that this is something that's worth doing, and we can see our, such and such a client organization has achieved what they needed in terms of warranties and insurance and the like. But government as a buyer is always going to be, to an extent, quite risk averse, or historically has certainly been that in a way that commercial enterprises may just look at, well, what's the potential reward. So I'd call out that sort of differentiation between what public sector buying and then the housing market, which is a little bit different. And then on the housing market side, I talked about it being quite fragmented. So yes, the idea that we could get lots and lots more technology out there, actually there's all of those same sort of insurability and warranty type questions there, but there's that, in a sense, there's that lack of pipeline. Not that there isn't a huge demand and a huge amount of housing that's going to be built, and indeed a huge amount of demand for sort of retrofitting and modifying existing buildings where you think, okay, but can 3D printing play a role there? But actually it's done in a very sort of bespoke, piecemeal way. So it's difficult for for a small, a sort of three person firm that's doing bricklaying. It's difficult to see how actually they're going to reskill themselves, do all of the education, and go out and invest in the tech, right? But that's the nature of the housing market in the UK for a huge number of the employees. So that's not to say I've sort of painted a picture which is all doom and gloom. There are loads of ways in which we can address culture, and some of the policy that we're working on with transforming infrastructure performance and with the construction playbook, which talks about, for example, contracting over a longer period of time, which actually is important, and in parallel with that, incentivizing suppliers for their performance. So not just, what's the lowest cost and how can we transfer as much risk as possible, but how can we get into alliancing and collaborative arrangements which incentivize performance and have a sufficiently long timeline on it that there's time for the incremental improvements and so on. So those are cultural changes which take time and education and so on, but there's definitely a way forwards there. So that's probably enough for me there.
No, thanks for being very thorough, Will. It's interesting to hear about how we talked earlier about kind of dispelling the hype around construction 3D printing, how in reality there needs to be a culture shift within the industry itself, like you say, and even among those within purchasing positions in government. So it's interesting to hear, Will. Thank you. In terms of going back to some of the other challenges that we come across in construction 3D printing, there's a question that's caught my eye from Malcolm Jones in the comment section, and it says, what new materials do you see coming forward other than a cement mixture, such as potentially clay, hemp, or something else? And this sounds like one that could be up your street, Ibon. What have you seen coming along with the companies that you're talking to, and potentially some of the other stuff that you're developing in-house at CEMEX?
Yeah, our interest in this entering this space, of course, is from the materials perspective and how we can add value in the mixes, in the design of the mixes. And that's why we have been trying to do in these past few years, trying to develop something. And to do so, beforehand we needed to understand which are the best components or the ingredients that are working better in this for the mixes. And linking this, CEMEX launched its first 3D printed a product in late 2021, and using that material or that additive, we have developed a couple of projects together with a Danish company, which is Cobot, in Angola and Oman. And we are trying to develop a few more using this material. And the rationale for this is to start showing and demonstrating that what we have developed is obviously efficient. It's usable for other construction companies, and also it has its fulfilling with the right properties that the material need to has, and fulfilling also with the specifications of the building, house, or what it has been printed. So that was our first development. Nevertheless, we are also working in the development of new versions or new products that we are going to be launching in the short term, and hopefully also trying to develop more projects to show to the market that this is something that is ready to be launched to the market. What we have been discussing before, we are going from the demo level to the commercial or marketable level, not only from the technological part, but also in the material side. What we have seen so far is that the composition of the mixes is another great challenge that this ecosystem is facing up, and we truly think that partnerships between for example, the entrepreneurial part together with corporations are more than needed in order to deliver something efficient, sustainable, and valuable to the market. So from our side, happy to explore other technological solutions and see how we can add value from the material perspective.
Okay, interesting stuff. Thank you, Ibon. And there's plenty more in the pipeline by the sounds of things as well. So we'll keep our ears collectively to the ground on that front. I'm just working my way through loads of comments, so thank you all for chipping in. I mean, one of the ones that's caught my eye is from Kesha Rogers, who works on space policy at La Roche-Pac. Who says that a lot of the stuff we've discussed is around housing, rightly so, because that's a lot of the stuff that's built up in the press about construction 3D printing. But what about other applications around bridges and other infrastructure? What's your take on that, Anna? Where else can it be applied?
Yeah, so as I said before, that's structural and not non-structural parts of the buildings, but also something like bridges. But I don't know about how it can be applied to the bridges, or this really, I would say, structurally intense objects, right? Because the bridges, that's every time I see bridge, it's a piece of art for me, like scientifically and architectural and all of the structural calculations behind this. So this is why it's really important when we ask ourselves, oh, how about bridges? How about this? How about that? Yes, you can apply this, but we talk about the construction. We're talking about the structures where people going to walk on or live in. So if you just come in from the common sense, what is the additive versus subtractive? Yes, we can 3D print bridges or whatever else we want to print. And we can use whatever materials we want to use. But the hard question is, what would be the end result? Is it going to be safe and sound for people who are going to use it or not? So just, pretty short answer. There are a million of options how we can apply concrete 3D printing and for what exact structures. But we all the time need to think about, is it going to be really feasible, viable, and safe and sound?
Very short answer, short and sweet. So there's also a lot of chat in the Q&A about tensile strength. Do you think that's an issue in that area as well, Anna?
So tensile strength and all other characteristics of the 3D printing material, it's something that can be solved by the material science, because basically, I really love saying this, that you can use even the sour cream to print, to extrude it, right? Everything can be extruded. But again, all of the characteristics and structural physical properties of the material, this is the main question. And if you have the right material developed, you can have the proper bonding between the materials. Because one of the the trick thing is that the material, the 3D print material, has to have a pretty fast setting time, but also it has to be still like a soft when the next layer start printing on top of this, so you can have that adhesion between the layers. So basically, with the right material science, you can solve it. But also, since you apply the structural reinforcement, like a vertical reinforcement, and also you can apply the ladder mesh as a horizontal reinforcement. Again, it's not something that we just invented or come up with this. Everything you can find in international building codes. So you just look at this, how it has to be built, and you apply this. So this is basically my answer to this.
Okay, that sounds like it's a response waiting for you, Ibon. Do you see it as a kind of a material formulation issue, tensile, kind of the tensile strength of resulting structures, or is that kind of a responsibility of other parts of the process and machine manufacturers, for example?
Of course, from as a material manufacturer, we do need to pay attention for this sort of properties and the requirement that we need to fulfill from the material side. I would say it's easier to prove the potential of the technology, including the technology, but then also the material side. If you are printing a house, because as Anna was highlighting, if you are proving for the first time this, the material, if you are proving it, for example, printing a bridge or a more complicated structure, it's easier to fail and discard these materials. But so far we have seen a lot of projects regarding bridges. Also, we see some potential in printing blocks for railways. Also printing tubes for underground drainage layers as well. So there are plenty of options in this 3D printing space. But of course, these challenges or questions regarding the properties, the tensile strength, and other properties need to be fulfilled and tested initially at a laboratory level, but also at a more controlled environment. And to do so, I think it's more friendly printing a house or a small prototype on site in order to pass to a higher level.
Okay, thanks for that, Ibon. So you've nicely taken me on to the last 5 minutes of the session, because I'm conscious that we're slightly running out of time. So you mentioned a whole host of potential applications for technology. Just if you could give us a final comment on where you see the technology being applied in the shorter term, maybe, Anna. Where can we expect to see the technology in the shorter term, and what do we need to do to kind of get there?
So our short-term goal is to start building the houses, 3D printed the houses, and have the first early adopters who are going to use this technology and, promote it and basically push the boundaries. So this is our short-term goal, and we focus on the United States first. And then the plan, of course, is to expand. But also when you expand, you need to find the right product market fit. All of the markets, all of the countries, they're completely different. Something that work here maybe don't work in other countries. So the short term is really like to start 3D printed houses on a commercial base, not just the prototypes, and also have the first users as a construction companies use this technology and give the technology in their hands. This is what I would say. And so that was basically your question, right?
Yeah, just a wrap up in the sense of where we go next and how do we get there. I mean, and from your perspective, Will, what's next for construction and 3D printing? Can you see it in the shorter term being used more widely in the construction sector, or what do we need to do to get there if not?
So kind of how we define short and medium term is slightly tricky, but can I see a role for it? Absolutely. I mean, I think so. If I go back to where I started, which is about societal outcomes, then the fundamental question needs to be why. So rather than kind of can we think of applications, there are lots and lots of problems out there that we need to solve, and 3D printing is going to solve some of those problems, and these are things that are kind of really pressing needs. So we need to solve kind of carbon and sustainability and circular economy challenges, alongside, certainly in the UK, sort of workforce challenges, skills challenges. So there are all sorts of challenges out there, and therefore I do think that there is a role as part of a sort of digitally enabled kind of more better using technology to solve a whole load of those challenges. So yeah, absolutely, I can see a role for it, and that's in housing and in sort of social and economic infrastructure, where the application makes sense to answer the why question, rather than because we think it's to Ibon and Anna's points, not because we think that that's a fun thing to do, but because it drives a real result, solves one of the problems that we're needing to solve.
Maybe just a final comment from you, Ibon, if we could keep it nice and brief as well, please. Same question.
Yeah, as a wrap up, I would highlight that we are moving to the next stage in this field, and also that we are going to start seeing more and more projects using 3D printing technology, for example, in countries like the Arab Emirates or in the Middle East, because of the friendly legislation that they have there, but also here in Europe, and also we are starting to see projects in the States. So the technology and the market is moving to the next stage. What I would highlight is the need of those partnerships between the technological side, the material companies, and also the construction companies, in order to push the technology to a more massive market and to a more friendly stage of the technology.
Great, thanks, Ibon. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this part of the webinar. We'll now go to the networking session. So if you haven't had your question answered, and I can see there's quite a few in the chat that haven't managed to get through, but please do stick around for the networking event, and hopefully we'll be able to get those answered for you. I also just want to say a big thank you to our panelists who have joined us today and treated us to such an interesting discussion on a topic that I'm sure will rear its head again in future. I've learned a lot from these guys, and I'm sure that our audience have too. So thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you all in the networking session. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.